The Senate will come back to order. Will the Secretary read for the first time House bills and resolutions?
Mr. President, the House has passed by the requisite constitutional majority the following bills of the House. House Bill 296 by Representative Hawkins of the 27th and others. Bill will be titled enacting Code Section 1563 of the OCGA relating to terms of Superior Court, so as to revise the term of court for the Superior Court of Hall County.
Judiciary.
House Bill 337 by Representative Blackman of 146th and others. Bill will be titled enactment Title 40 of the OCGA relating to motor vehicles and traffic, so as to provide for and regulate peer-to-peer vehicle sharing.
Regulated industries.
House Bill 373 by Representative Werkheiser of the 157th and others. Bill will be titled enactment Title 34 of the OCGA relating to labor and industrial relations, so as to change certain provisions.
Insurance and labor.
House Bill 447 by Representative LaRisha of the 169th and others. A bill will be titled enactment Chapter 8 of Title 48 of the OCGA relating to sales and use taxes, so as to exempt jet fuel.
Finance.
House Bill 512 by Representative Watson of the 172nd and others. A bill will be titled enactment Chapter 8 of Title 2 of the OCGA relating to agricultural commodities promotion, so as to provide for
agriculture.
Mr. President, the House has passed by the requisite constitutional majority the following bills of the House. House Bill 288 by Representative Powell of the 32nd and others. A bill will be titled enactment Article 2, Chapter 6 of Title 15 of the OCGA relating to clerks of superior courts, so as to revise the sums that the
Judiciary.
House Bill 325 by Representative Clark of the 147th and others. A bill will be titled enactment Code Section 3587.1 of the OCGA relating to authority of counsel to refuse certificate to applicant or to discipline counsel certified officer.
Public safety.
House Bill 502 by Representative Welch of the 110th. The bill will be titled enactment Article 7 of Chapter 10 of Title 9 and Article 2 of Chapter 8 of Title 17 of the OCGA relating to continuances, so as to revise continuances for members of the Board of Regents and the Attorney General to provide for related.
Special judiciary.
House Bill 525 by Representative Stevens of the 164th. The bill will be titled enactment Article 4 of Chapter 7 Title 50 of the OCGA relating to the Georgia International Maritime Trade Center, so as to dissolve the Georgia International Maritime Trade Center Authority.
Economic development.
Mr. President, that concludes the order.
All right, we are now ready to go back on to the rules calendar. Will the Secretary read the caption for Senate Bill 190?
Senate Bill 190 by Senator Kennedy of the 18th and others. The bill will be titled enactment Article 2 of Chapter 9 of Title 19 of the OCGA relating to the Child Custody Interstate Jurisdiction Act, so as to provide that a party may bring a counterclaim for contempt or enforcement of a child custody order or for modification of legal or physical custody in response to a complaint seeking a change of legal or physical custody and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 18th to speak to Senate Bill 190.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues. Bring you Senate Bill 190. It's a pretty simple bill. It comes to you on the recommendation from the Georgia Bar. It's also been vetted by the Domestic Relations subsection of the Georgia Bar. It really does a couple of things. Number one, it changes some outdated language used with regard to custody and legal custodian and physical custodian for the definitions of legal custody and physical custody. It also, and most importantly, it allows in the case of child custody cases and those type issues under the current statute, if someone wants to bring a counterclaim for contempt or sometimes other related matters within that case, they can't bring them within the same case. They have to bring them as a separate action. So it's not very good for judicial economy. This bill would correct that problem and allow all the issues between the two litigants, which are typically former spouses, to be brought together in one civil action and heard in an efficient manner. It also conserves judicial economy by allowing the judge to hear counter motions that may need to be brought. Being brought all together is good for judicial economy. It's good for the litigants, good for everybody. Not aware of anyone that had any opposition to this, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Senator, you have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? The chair hears none, and the previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 52, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Secretary, can you read the caption of Senate Resolution 264?
Senate Resolution 264 by Senator Moles to the 53rd and others, a resolution creating the Joint Emergency Medical Services Study Committee and for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 53rd to speak to Senate Resolution 264. Don't pull a hamstring.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate members, looky here. This bill, Senate Resolution 264, that's from the senator from Athens right there. This is a study committee, and we haven't done anything like this in many years for the emergency medical services, and this creates that to deal with safety standards, accreditation, 911 response, proper education, technology advancement, and other applicable things. Ask your favorable consent to this joint study committee. Mr. President, I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the resolution? The chair hears none, and the previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this resolution now be adopted? The question is on the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor of the resolution will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the adoption of the resolution, the yeas are 52, the nays are 1. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Mr. Secretary, will you read the caption of Senate Bill 108?
Senate Bill 108 by Senator Martin the Ninth and others, a bill entitled Enactment Part 2 of Article 6 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA, relating to competencies and core curriculum so as to require courses in computer science in middle school and high school to provide for legislative findings, provide for definitions, provide for a phase-in of such requirement, provide for courses through the Georgia Virtual School, provide for grants for professional development programs for teachers providing instruction in computer science courses and content and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Education and Youth offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 210, a bill be titled Enactment Part 15 of Article 6 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA, relating to miscellaneous provisions of the Quality Basic Education Act so as to provide for recess for students in kindergarten grades 1 through 5 and for other purposes.
For what purpose does the senator from the 38th rise?
Mr. President, I would like to ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 35th for business outside of the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator from the 35th is excused. Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 9th to speak to Senate Bill 108.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, computer skills for our students have never been more important. Even jobs that aren't in the technology industry now require a basic knowledge of computers and how they interact with our world. And you would think our education system would be responding to these to our 21st century economy. However, there's still very few students that actually take a course in computer science before graduating from high school. SB 08 will require local school systems to offer a course in computer science in each of their high schools phased in over a 3-year period beginning in the 2022 to 23 school year. It also requires middle schools to offer at least one exploratory computer science course as well. We realize this will take some time and effort on our parts and on part of the school systems. That's why we gave extra time. In addition, this legislation will set up grants for professional development for our teachers so that we can increase the number of instructors capable of teaching these courses. The bill also tasks the Department of Education, Georgia Department of Education, to ensure that the Georgia Virtual School has sufficient capacity to enable these schools to utilize computer science courses using these resources. I ask for your vote on this important step to make sure our young students have the resources they need to be ready for the workforce of tomorrow. I will yield for questions.
You have no questions, Senator.
I yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none and the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 51, the nays are 1. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed by substitute. Looks like we've got a room full. Most folks are seated. I just want to give an early heads up that it looks like we're going to start tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So I just want to give everybody enough time to make some planning. I want to get as many folks back home as quickly as possible after a long, busy week, but I wanted to give you a heads up. We'll continue to remind you. But 9 a.m. for a start time tomorrow. Will the Secretary read the caption of Senate Bill 2?
Senate Bill 2 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others, a bill entitled enactment Title 46 of the OCGA relating to public utilities and public transportation so as to specifically authorize electric membership corporations and their affiliates to provide broadband services, provide for definitions, to authorize certain financing and partnerships for the provision of broadband services, to prohibit cross-subsidization between the provision of broadband services and electric membership corporations' natural gas activities or electricity services activities and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities offers following substitute to Senate Bill 2, a bill entitled enactment Chapter 3, Title 46 of the OCGA relating to electrical service so as to specifically authorize electric membership corporations and their affiliates to provide broadband services and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 51st to speak to Senate Bill 2.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I bring to you a bill that you probably have seen in the past. SB 2, Senate Bill 2, is one of our priorities for this year dealing with broadband. We've been working on this issue for a couple of years now, and we've worked on it over the summer and through the fall, and we believe that it's a good time to pass this bill over to the House and continue working with the House members to perfect the bill, but we have a good bill that we want to present to you today. It authorizes the 41 EMCs across our state to get in the broadband business and to deploy internet services if they choose to do so. As you all probably know, there are over 4 million rural customers that get their electricity from a EMC in Georgia. There's a letter on your desk. It has a map on the second page. I would encourage you to look at that, and you will see the red on this map indicates the service areas of the Georgia EMCs, and they literally cover 90% of the state or more. The bill has been debated several times in committee. It was scrubbed pretty hard from all the industry people out in the hallway. The committee members made several amendments to the bill, It's in a posture at this time that I think we can continue to work on it, and I would encourage you to vote for it. There are provisions in the bill for cross-subsidy language, similar to what we have for natural gas providers that are also EMCs. There's other provisions in the bill dealing with pole attachment fees. You've heard that discussion here for many years now. If you've been in this General Assembly for a long time, you know that has been a very contentious debate. I'm happy to say between AT&T and the EMCs, those two organizations came up with a compromise that's in this bill that would essentially freeze all the pole attachment fees on an EMC power pole under their current agreement that each of these companies have with their EMCs. There is a provision in the bill for a inflation index, and other than that, those fees would be remain frozen into the future in accordance with their private agreements. This bill allows those EMCs to go to the Public Service Commission to get a certificate of authority. They would then be available for grants and loans that would come from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which Secretary Perdue has indicated a strong interest in seeing Georgia and Georgia's EMCs go after those grants, which could start as early as May of this year. Mr. President, I'm happy to yield for any questions, and I'd ask for your vote for this bill.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 15th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
I sure will.
Senator, it's really in the form of a question and just to comment and to say thank you for all the work you've done on this bill. And I was going to ask about the Public Service Commission, that aspect, and the debate we had over that and where it was going, but I see in the bill at the beginning that it designate the Public Service Commission, and there were some people who, isn't it true that there were some people who really wanted that to be a homegrown thing in the courts in that particular jurisdictions?
Yes, sir, that's correct, Senator. And if you'll look on the next to the last page of the bill, you will see that language starts on lines 199 and continues on through the end of that section on 211. So that language is in the bill as it left the committee, and we'll continue to work on that as we move to the House.
And I just want to commend you on that as well as the cross-subsidization.
I appreciate your support. Thank you.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 53, the nays are 1. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, will you read the caption of Senate Bill 58?
Senate Bill 58 by Senator Karen Shack of the 48th, a bill will be titled enacting Code Section 23.3.122 of the OCGA, relating to investigations by Attorney General, civil actions authorized, intervention by government, limitation on participating in litigation, stay of discovery, alternative remedies, division of recovery, and limitations so as to eliminate the requirement that the Attorney General provide written approval that allows for a private person to bring a civil action regarding false taxpayer claims and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Judiciary offers the following substitute: Senate Bill 58, A bill will be titled and enacted in Code Section 23.3.122 of the OCG relating to investigations by Attorney General, civil actions authorized, intervention by government, limitation on participating in litigation, stay of discovery, alternative remedies, division of recovery, and limitations so as to eliminate the requirement that Attorney General provide written approval that allows for a private person to bring a civil action regarding false taxpayer claims and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 48th to present her first bill to this chamber.
Thank you, Mr. President. You are indeed correct, Mr. President. This is my first bill, and I'm honored to get to introduce this bill. First, I would like to thank my esteemed colleagues on the Judiciary Committee who helped me in perfecting this bill. And of course, I would like to thank this body and fellow Georgians, because this bill is about better government and keeping taxpayer money safe. So this is a great bill. Senate Bill 58 is an amendment to the Georgia Taxpayer Protection Against False Claims Act, which was passed by this body in 2012. A similar law currently exists in 29 other states. This law has served as a critical tool for law enforcement to protect our taxpayer dollars, but it needs a little bit of tweaking, and that's why I'm here with you today. We are only seeking to delete 7 words from the current statute. Under the current statute, a whistleblower must get the permission of the Attorney General to file his or her claim. No other state requires this step. This extra step is really red tape that has no value when the Attorney General always has the ultimate right to dismiss the case at any point after its filing. Why is this a problem? In the whistleblower world, there's what's called a first-to-file rule, which means you have to be the first one to the courthouse or you lose. Late whistleblower filers either don't recover or get much less, so it's important to be to the courthouse first. This gatekeeping role is unnecessary because, as I said, the Attorney General by statute has the power to dismiss the case. This really causes an undue burden for the Attorney General by tasking him to essentially decide and approve a case very quickly without all the facts, essentially deciding the case in a vacuum. The impact of having this additional burden is that the whistleblower is going to go to another state, and that other state is going to recover much more taxpayer money. And we want Georgia to be right in line with everybody else so people can come here and file their claims and know that they are not behind the 8 ball. As I said, Georgia is the only state with this approval process. 29 other states and the federal False Claims Act do not require this. And as I said, because those other states don't have this red tape, people go to those states, and those states protect their taxpayer money better than we do. This is a tried and true process currently being done by the federal government and those 29 other states, and also being done in our Medicaid Act, which has been very successful since it was introduced. Mr. President, that is my presentation, and I am happy to take questions.
Do you yield for questions?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 28th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield?
Yes, sir.
Senator, is it not true that this may be your first bill, but you certainly had no issues finding that well since you've been down there 742 times?
The gentleman knows of which he speaks. I am trying to live up to the great standards that are set before me, and I fill big shoes. That is the prior gentleman from the 48th, so I've got a lot of pressure on me to do that.
Fair enough. Thank you, and good luck for the rest of this trip.
Thank you, sir.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 33rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
I didn't have my hearing aid on today, and it sounded like you said the 7 last words of Christ. Do you know but when it comes to doing something with the Constitution, do you know that this is the Lent season?
Yes, sir, I do.
And you know, Judas did keep the tithes and offering and take care of the tax for the disciples. How do we know you're going to do a better job than he did with this bill?
The senator from the 33rd knows of which he speaks, but I have great confidence that if this law is passed, that we will, as a state, recover much more taxpayer dollars on behalf of our citizens, and also be able to go after fraudsters in a more quick manner because it takes out the red tape, and the Attorney General will be able to focus his efforts on in other areas that need attention. And just to let y'all know, over $10 billion has been recovered in Medicaid money since those statutes were started in approximately 1986. And $56 billion has been recovered on the national level since 1986. So this is big money, folks, and we don't want to miss out.
Do you continue to yield?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 46th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator allow me to interrupt your hazing for 2 or 3 serious questions?
Always, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. You made a comment that the Attorney General is able to dismiss any cases that he doesn't approve of after they've been filed.
Yes, sir.
According to the terms of the legislation, though, he would have to state the reasons for consenting to the dismissal, and he would have to, the court would then have to enter an order approving it. So he doesn't really have control. He can't unilaterally dismiss it. The attorney has to, and the Attorney General has to consent to it, but then the court has to agree. So it's not like he is some gatekeeper after the fact, right?
In essence, the way you're correct in your read of the statute. In essence, the way it works is that if the Attorney General calls the lawyer and says, look, I don't think this is a good case, no lawyer worth their salt is going to keep that case, and they will recommend to their client to dismiss, and those cases are dismissed very quickly. When you're filing a whistleblower case and you are the plaintiff's lawyer, you represent the relator, and if the Attorney General decides your case is a good case and intervenes, you work closely with the Attorney General. But also in dismissing cases, lawyers do the same because we don't want to waste anybody's time and money. These are typically contingency cases, which means you have to invest in those cases, and you want to make sure you're making a good investment as a relator and as a lawyer and as the Attorney General.
Second question. Georgia has worked very hard to develop a reputation as a business-friendly state. Most of these type of cases are against business entities, correct?
That would be correct.
And isn't it a useful role for the Attorney General to sort of screen these cases before they are permitted to go forward, because they are being brought on behalf of all of the citizens of Georgia who are being defrauded of their tax money? And the whistleblower, the individual, is still going to get their cut no matter who their attorney is, whether the Attorney General brings it on behalf of the state or selects which of perhaps many civil attorneys would be appropriate and maybe have the expertise in that area, like some of these opioid cases we have going on now.
Sir, what would happen is the whistleblower is going to go to another state and we're going to miss out on the money. You're correct that the whistleblower will recover, but I submit to you that if there's a good whistleblower case and Georgia can recover taxpayer dollars that have been defrauded, that's what we want to do. We are business friendly, but we're not fraud friendly. We don't want our people to be defrauded. And if we're a serious state about fraud, we should have the most aggressive whistleblower statutes. And as you are probably aware, this has a long history starting back from Abraham Lincoln in the Civil War when people were defrauding the government. Ronald Reagan, when he was president, re-upped or reinvigorated this statute, and then it has grown since then. And again, these are billions of taxpayer dollars, and I submit to you that we want to be business friendly, but we want to be good business friendly.
My final concern is that it seems like it creates a race to the courthouse, encourages people to be the first one to file so that that lawyer can get their percentage of the fee or whatever. And I haven't heard any complaints up until now of people having valid claims and saying, oh, the Attorney General won't let me file my claim. Are you familiar with any of those type of problems where the current system is not working?
Yes, sir, I am. I am aware that, first off, it is a race to the courthouse, but it's a race to the courthouse with a good case. Again, a plaintiff's lawyer who's investing their time, energy, and money, and a relator who's investing their time, energy, and money are not going to want to throw a bad case up. Plus, and what happens is, when you're a whistleblower attorney, you're looking at which state you want to file in. Which state am I going to file in? A state where I have to wait for an attorney general to go through and, again, make a decision in a vacuum, or go to a state where I can just file it right away and I'm protected. And another key point that Mr. Chairman brought up, Mr. Chairman from the 23rd brought up during our hearings, is the statute of limitations is always running. And so the quicker we get it filed, the further back in time we get to go to recover the fraud that has been exacted against our people. And so we do want to be first to the courthouse, and we do want to be a business-friendly state. And my position to you is that we are business-friendly when we are protecting our taxpayer money, and we are making sure that those businesses that come here play by the rules.
Thank you, Senator. I will allow the hazing to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Senator, continue to yield.
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 56th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
Senator, isn't it true that you and I have districts that come together and we represent some of the same cities and areas?
Yes, sir, that is my understanding.
That's great. Senator, will you yield for a series of questions?
Yes, sir.
So, Senator, I know that you worked extraordinarily hard in your election. I'm sure you developed great relationships with our local city council members and county commissioners. Is that not true?
Well, I will say to you that there are several that actually took a position against me in the race. So I don't want to speak to relationships. I will tell you that since being elected, I have reached out to all the cities in my district, which there are 8 of them, and I have reached out to all the mayors and council and have met with all of them to talk about what's important for them in this session.
Senator, that's great. I knew you'd be that magnanimous if you'll yield for another question.
Yes, sir.
So with that, we represent Johns Creek, Georgia together, do we not? I've been recently speaking to them, so what was their feedback on your first bill and whether they supported it or were not in favor?
You know, I don't think I've actually heard from the city council or the mayor of Johns Creek as to whistleblower legislation. I have heard from many, many people, constituents, that don't like being defrauded and don't like that they can't afford health care because companies are overbilling the government and we're losing out, and it's making health care more unaffordable. And I know that's something we've all been focused on this session very much. And as I said, we do have a Medicaid statute, but this statute also allows defense contractor fraud, local government fraud. So like if somebody's paving the road and overbilling Johns Creek, we can go after that. So I would think they'd be in favor, but to be honest, I have not heard from Johns Creek mayor or city council specifically as to this bill.
Ooh, so Senator, do you further yield?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So you didn't reach out to your very constituents on your first most important bill?
Well, I have reached out to all my constituents over and over and over again. I don't know if you watch my videos online, but on Facebook every week I give a weekly update. Well, on Facebook every week I give an update, and I did tell everybody, hey, look, I filed Senate Bill 58 as my first bill because I'm so committed to saving taxpayer dollars, and I got so many great comments back, and I encourage you, Senator, to watch my videos because I ask them in every video to please let me know what they think. Please reach out, and they can contact me at, I give them my email, and they all have my cell phone too. So I'm not barring anybody from calling me. In fact, my cell phone is 770-855-0243. And I encourage anybody, if you'd like to tell me anything about this bill, to reach out and let me know because I'm here to serve the people. But the taxpayer money is critical to our success and to our business-friendly environment.
Final question, if you'll yield, Senator.
Yes, sir.
I think the Senator at the 28 may have alluded this, but in the Senate rules, are you familiar with the Senate rules?
I try to be.
In the points of personal privilege, it actually says may, not shall, have to have one every day. Is that not true?
Well, you know, I will comment to this. I'm very lucky that I have some senior folks here who have been helping me to figure out how to act in this chamber. And I really want to call out Senator Ed Harbison, who sits right next to me. Oh, sorry. The senator from the 15th. The senator from the 15th. You're right. You're right. I just violated a rule. I apologize. Senator from the 15th has been helping me, and I really want to thank you, Senator. He's done a great job. He has a lot of patience and answers all my dumb questions, and I appreciate his help, as well as some of the veterans who are here in the room on both sides of the aisle have been very helpful, and also lawyers have been very helpful to me. And I've been developing great relationships, and people are helping me, but I do understand that points of privilege are optional.
Well, Senator, I was going to yield, but now that you mentioned seniors, are you calling members of this body old?
Well, the senator from the 7th, I believe, may be our youngest, and we tend to be a little more gray in the hair, but I think that's because we've lived great lives. Well, I apologize. Senator from the 30th has no hair. That's because he worries too much about what he has to do, and he also served with great distinction in the military, and I commend him. He's a colonel, retired colonel, and so I have greatly enjoyed working with all the folks, and hope that all our gray hair shows that we are wise in our years.
In lieu of your warm embrace of brevity, and the facts that we are still on the first page of the rules calendar, do you continue to yield?
No, sir, I do not.
The senator has yielded the well. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 47, the nays are 5. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 121?
Senate Bill 121 by Senator Walker of the 20th and others, a bill entitled Enactment Part 2 of Article 2 of Chapter 13, Title 16 of the OCGA, relating to the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program database so as to increase the length of time that prescription information is retained in the database from 2 years to 5 years, to authorize the Attorney General's Medicaid Fraud Control Unit to access the database for enforcement purposes and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Health and Human Services offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 121, a bill entitled Enactment Part 2 of Article 2 of Chapter 13, Title 16 of the OCGA, relating to the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program database so as to increase the length of time that prescription information retained in the database from 2 years to 5 years, to authorize the Attorney General's Medicaid Fraud Control Unit to access the database for enforcement purposes and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair would like to recognize the senator from Perry to speak to Senate Bill 121.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be a little briefer than the freshman senator from the 48th. I bring to you Senate Bill 121 on the request of the Attorney General's office. We have in Georgia, a prescription drug monitoring program that was established years ago where pharmacies and physicians put information in when they prescribe Schedule 2, 3, 4, or 5 drugs. And when we established this bill, we did not include the Medicaid fraud unit of the Attorney General's office as being able to access those records under their administrative subpoena power. The federal law enforcement agencies can do that currently, and the Attorney General wants to be able to access that without having to basically piggyback off of the federal agencies. We are responsible here in Georgia for having monitoring Medicaid and making sure there isn't fraud, and since we have that responsibility, we need to be able to have access to this database. It also changes the record retention from 2 years to 5 years. Are there any questions? This passed unanimously out of the Health and Human Services Committee, and I would appreciate a yes vote on this bill.
You have no questions, Senator.
All right, I yield the well. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 48th to speak to the bill. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. President. You just heard me talk about taxpayer fraud and the Medicaid unit that also goes after fraudsters in the Medicaid system. I urge you to pass this bill. It increases access from 2 to 5 years, which means more data and more folks that we can go after for healthcare fraud. And it also gives administrative subpoena power to the Attorney General's Medicaid fraud unit. I have worked with them extensively, and they do a great job, and it'd be great for them to be able to have their own subpoena power. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Any other senator wish to speak to or against the measure? The question is on the adoption of the committee's substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee's substitute? The chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 51, the nays are 1. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 171?
Senate Bill 171 by Senator Wilkinson of the 50th and others. A bill will be titled enactment in Title 15, Chapter 2 of Title 21 and Chapter 5 of Title 48 of the OCGA relating to courts, primaries, and elections generally, and ad valorem taxation of property, respectively, so as to modify the compensation of various local government officials and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on State and Local Government Operations offers to the following substitute Senate Bill 171. The bill will be titled enactment in Title 15, Chapter 2 of Title 21, and Title 48 of the OCGA relating to courts, elections, and primaries generally, and revenue and taxation, respectively, so as to modify certain provisions regarding the compensation received by certain local government officials and for other purposes. Amendment 1 by Senator Ginn of the 47th and others offers the following amendment. Amend the Senate Committee substitute to Senate Bill 171 by inserting after therewith on line 7 the following to provide for an effective date by inserting after line 374 the following. This act shall become effective on January 1st, 2021, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 50th to speak to Senate Bill 171.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. I come today to advocate for Senate Bill 171, which would provide for an increase, a 5% increase in the minimum base salary for 4 constitutional officers: the sheriff, the tax commissioner, the probate court judge, and the clerk of court. This base salary has not been increased since 2006. We have sheriffs in our state that are making less than $50,000 a year, and they have deputies who are making more than they are. There has been some concern expressed about some of the counties, maybe some of the larger counties, who set their salaries through local legislation. I do want to make it clear that this legislation would not affect the salaries in Cobb, Fulton, Gwinnett, or DeKalb, because they have their local legislation, and if they're already paid more than the minimum, it will not increase their salary. I think the focus of this bill is on recruitment and retention of good people. I think our sheriffs, our clerk of courts, our probate court judges, and our tax commissioners have very important positions in our county. Many of them are responsible for millions of dollars and for the tax digest in the county. And I think we need to make sure that they have an incentive to serve in these important positions. With that said, I urge the passage of this bill. Also, I will speak to the amendment while I am here. The amendment puts an effective date. This would become effective on January the 1st, 2021. It would not increase anyone's salary in the middle of a term. It would wait until the new officials are elected and set it on January the 1st, 2021. So I would urge your support of this important bill. Mr. President, if there are no questions, I yield the well.
You have a question.
Okay. And
Chair,
okay.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 34th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
I will.
Senator, are you familiar with the raise for the legislators?
Seems like I've heard the ones in Georgia or another state.
In Georgia.
Oh, yeah, it seems like I heard something about that.
What are your thoughts on that one, Senator?
I really think that's probably not germane.
Thank you, Senator.
I mean, I'm not the LG or anything. That's just my thoughts.
You have no more questions.
Thank you.
The chair recognizes the senator from the 47th to speak to his amendment. Senator waives speaking to his amendment. All right. Any other senators wish to speak for or against the bill? All right, the question now is on the adoption of... Chair recognizes the senator from the 31st.
I would ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 51st. Oh, well, you hadn't been, sorry.
All right, we're going to take up amendment number 1. The question is on the adoption of amendment 1. Is there objection to the adoption of the amendment? Hearing none, the floor amendment is adopted. The question is now on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute as amended? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted as amended. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 51, the nays are 1. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, will you read the caption of Senate Resolution 237?
Senate Resolution 237 by Senator Cowser to the 46th and others. A resolution requesting that the United States Congress call a convention under Article 5 of the Constitution of the United States limited, proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the United States to set a limit on the number of terms that a person may be elected as a member of the United States House of Representatives, and to set a limit on the number of terms that a person may be elected as a member of the United States Senate and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from Athens to speak to Senate Resolution 237.
Thank you, Mr. President. If this sounds familiar, it's because we passed this bill 2 years ago. It is a mechanism to propose an amendment to limit the terms of United States congressmen and United States senators. Try to get some semblance of stability there in Washington. It's in such dysfunction now. We think this is a way to break the logjam, get people not be invested to live there for generations and be more responsive to their voters. I think this passed the Rules Committee unanimously. I urge your favorable consent. Happy to answer any questions if you may have any. Amendment convention.
He waves. Chair recognizes the senator from the 36th.
Senator Yield.
I yield.
Isn't it true, Senator, that we have term limits now and they're called elections, that voters can get out and send a person back, return them to office or remove them from office?
That's true. Now relax. This is not aimed at a state senator here in Georgia. You can stay as long as your voters will let you. You know, in Congress these days, the retention rate is well over 90%. It's because those congressional races are so expensive. They cost millions of dollars. And it's once somebody gets in and they're an incumbent, it's very hard for the challenger to raise money, and that's why you have people there for decades now that don't have much responsiveness to their voters at all.
Further question, if you will?
I'll be happy to yield further,
Isn't
yes.
Isn't it also true that it's often been said, and it's been seen to be true in states that have had the term limits imposed on state elected officials, that you wind up with a bunch of newbies, and the lobbyists and the administrative staff are the people that know how to operate the gears of government, and you constantly have a flow of people that are just learning the ropes and then they're termed out. I mean, are you familiar with that?
I'm not hearing that there's so little turnover in Congress. I'd be surprised if anybody's complained of that problem there.
That's true, but I'm saying where we have seen term limits play out, it's gone poorly. It's gone poorly.
I can tell you this, as far as term limits in the state Senate, y'all look around yourselves. You know, I've been here for 12 years now, which I think my wife would say is a plenty, but I'm now, I think, number 7 in seniority in this entire body. So there are less than 7 people that have been here 12 years or more. So I think the voters of Georgia and the members of this body recognize that this isn't a lifetime career, that it is do your public service, and you know, we don't get embedded in the system. This is not directed at the state legislature in any way. It's at the United States Congress.
I understand that, and I'm just simply saying, and true, that the concept has not proven to be a good one when it's been put into place in states, and that having the voters have their choice of keeping someone rather than a term limits is what many prefer. Thank you, though, for taking the question.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 16th.
Senator Gill?
I do.
Isn't it true that this resolution is only limited to term limits, and that has been concern that if you call a convention that other things can be addressed, and that this is limited to one
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out, Senator. There have been some people that worry that a convention might consider different issues. This is unique for one subject matter, term limits. There are 11 or 12 other states that have already asked for an amendment convention for this single amendment. Georgia has a delegate limitation act that we passed a few years ago in conjunction with a balanced budget amendment call such as this that requires our delegates to consider only what's in the call. And so they would be bound to only consider one issue. And for a further backup, if there were to be an agreement on an amendment, it still has to be ratified by 3/4 of the states, just like the Equal Rights Amendment that some of the members of this body were supporting earlier this session.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Appreciate
you for
it.
your question.
Do you continue to yield?
Be glad to.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 21st.
Senator Yield,
Be glad to yield to you.
are we going to have to pass this on an annual basis? I believe you had said
No.
something about it takes 34 states or?
It takes 2/3 of the states to apply to Congress for a convention to be called. So if we're at 12 now, it would take 24. Or no, you do not have to do it on an annual
So
basis.
how long is this good?
It's indefinite unless we choose to rescind it.
Okay,
in the
thank you.
future. Thank
Do you
you.
continue to yield?
Be glad to.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm laughing because I know I put my light on way before the senator from the 36 did. But the only question I have for the senator, if he will yield, is similar to what the senator from the 36 said, are we not term limited, not us, but our congressional members, our U.S. senators, if we don't vote them back in? That's a term limit.
That
Is
would
it
be
not?
accurate.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience. Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman yield?
Be glad to yield to my new
Senator, earlier you
client.
mentioned.
Be glad to yield to my new client on that contempt charge.
Yes, thank you.
My pro bono
Appreciate
services
it.
remain
The indulgence of-
available. I'll be watching the board to make sure what that fee will be.
Isn't it true? I appreciate the indulgence of all of my colleagues on that transgression.
Absolutely, and it happens to all of us. Amazing how much the person whose bill is on the board gets distracted talking to their friends and misses their own vote.
I certainly agree. But if you'll yield,
Be glad
you
to.
mentioned as one of the reasons for this resolution that the power of incumbency is strong because of the expense, that races are quite expensive. Did you not?
Absolutely, yes. Hey, by the way, this is a bipartisan proposal. It benefits your party as much as mine, and the House has a similar version that has a number of Democratic co-sponsors to it. So it's not singled out for one party or the other. It's for the citizens to have a fair chance to elect new representatives instead of people that are in there with these multi-million-dollar war chests that it's almost impossible to raise a valid campaign against.
Well, wouldn't you agree, Senator, that really it says more about our system of campaign finance than it actually does about term limits? And I would support you on a resolution to try to tackle that problem, because I do think that it leads to some of the outcomes that you are trying to address in here.
You are singing to the choir, Senator. This is the type of mechanism that is being used in other states to attack the United States Supreme Court decision in Citizens United that has sort of opened the floodgates to these anonymous contributions and outside money coming into elections that you can't even trace or hold a candidate accountable for. That's part of what has got this built-in system of incumbent protection in the United States Congress, because it takes so much money, and because of United States Supreme Court decisions, you can't even trace that money now. I would welcome an opportunity to work on that here, but we would be doing something that's already been deemed unconstitutional by the United States Supreme Court. So the only way to change that is something like this. If you're not going to talk Congress into limiting their own monopolies, basically, we as the people, the states, we're a republic here, have the authority to demand change where Congress won't impose limits on themselves, just like the balanced budget problem. You know, I think that's one of the worst problems facing the country. Well, Congress isn't balancing the budget, whether it's a Democratic administration or a Republican administration. So we're going to have to tell them to. We're going to have to impose that limit on them. States got the power. This is how you do it. I think term limits is another area where we ought to assert our power of the states, and this is how you go about doing it.
Isn't it true, Senator, that we also could call for a constitutional convention to tackle Citizens United?
You absolutely could, and many states have. Now, I think it's better to do them on single subject matters. So this doesn't include that. This is just term limits. A few years ago, we passed one just for balanced budgets. Many states have passed them to try to overturn Citizens United, and I'll show you how to do this if you want to file that bill next year. You'll be surprised how much support you get across the aisle.
I look forward to working on that with
I
you, Senator.
appreciate
Thank
your
you.
support on this one also then. Okay.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 14th for a question.
Senator Yield?
I certainly do.
Senator, isn't it true that the actual definition of a term limit is a legal restriction that limits the number of terms an office holder may serve?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well, and I urge your favorable consideration.
Chair recognizes the minority leader to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Won't be long. This issue we all probably have our own thoughts about. Just want to come up so the people watching will kind of put in context why some people may not support this measure. First of all, because some people serve a long time and they are the ones that usually get in the news a lot. Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi come to mind as long-serving members. Former Senator John McCain, long-serving members, they pop in your mind, so you get a perception in the general public. The fact is, in the United States Congress, in the current term, the average length of service is 8.6 years. Over multiple terms, over the last 50 years, about 9.1 years is the average duration for serving the U.S. House, about 10 years in the United States Senate. We all know there were 2 or 3 high-profile senators that did not seek re-election last year, and a lot of people don't get elected to Congress till they're fairly mature, so that may limit their terms as well. So this may be more of a perceived issue than a real issue. Number 2, as was stated by the senator from the 36th, there is a tremendous and real concern that by taking out people who are responsive to the voters from being the one to make the decisions, from having the seniority, you have the bureaucrats and you have the lobbyists. Yes, money is a big problem, and it's going to be a big problem now and whether or not we pass term limits. The fact is that sometimes the people who've been around 26 years or 15 years or 12 years that have the confidence to take the risk, to stand against the moneyed interest groups, or to tell them that they're confident enough in the strength and the resolve of their district that they can withstand not getting their money or having their money spent against them. I put to you that I think term limits for the United States Congress is a bad idea, so therefore I have to vote against this today. Also, just a little bit of a caution, although the senator, many legal experts do think you can limit a constitutional convention to one issue, there are questions to that, and but they do have to be ratified by 3/4 states, so there are some protections, but there are some concerns to the process. But the fundamental underlying issue is one that's up for debate. I put it to you that if you hire an employee to do a job, and you want them to do a good job, and tell them that you do the great job, you dedicate yourself for me, but after the 4th term, you can't be reelected again, you lose your job. It doesn't motivate them anymore to represent you or fight for you. Doesn't help, hopefully it doesn't hurt. I have seen people in this body who, when they knew they were leaving, started representing certain industry groups more than they were representing their constituents. So having another election ahead of you sometimes keeps you grounded in representing your district, your community, and the people of your state. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 3rd to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to express my support for the concept because I do agree that people get up to Congress and they stay too long. But I also have a concern. My concern is for the Constitutional Convention process. And as I see it, we have to rely on Congress to limit that process. And that just concerns me because of some of the things that I see going on in Congress. You know, I mean, we have people wanting to eliminate everything from airplanes to bovine flatulence. And I just, that causes me concern. And I just wanted to express my concerns and even my vote. So thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the resolution? The chair hears none, and the previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this resolution now be adopted? The question is on the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the adoption of the resolution, the yeas are 31, the nays are 20. The resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Mr. Secretary, will you read the caption of Senate Bill 213?
Senate Bill 213 by Senator Heath of the 31st and others, a bill will be titled enactment Article 2 of Chapter 5 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to campaign contributions so as to revise the content of and certain reporting times for certain campaign disclosure reports and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Ethics Committee offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 213, a bill will be titled enactment Article 2 of Chapter 5 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to campaign contributions so as to revise the content of and certain reporting times for certain campaign disclosure reports and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes leader.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 31st to speak to Senate Bill 213.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, I had distributed a copy of an email that really explains this legislation, but in case you've gotten covered up, I will try to explain. This does essentially three things. Closes a huge loophole in the PAC reporting, and it clarifies when you reset your contributions and expenditures when filing your reports. And then it brings uniformity in the 7 business day, the 2 business day reports to be in 7 days prior to an election. This comes as a request from the Government Transparency and Campaign Finance Commission. I would urge your support on the bill. Be glad to answer or try to answer any questions if there are any.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you.
Oh, you actually do have a question if you'd like to yield.
I used to be faster than that.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield, please? Will the senator yield, please? I just want you to go through the changes that are being made, if you would, please.
I will. Well, did you get the copy of the email placed on your desk from the? It's got all the. There's 3 bullet points on it. It goes through that. While you're looking for it, I'll touch on that again.
Okay, that's okay. I do want to ask another question.
Sure.
Did we not, and I think you were here when we did this, did we not recently change this to what we currently have in law, and now it looks like we're changing it back to what it was before?
It's not going back to where it was. We got left with multiple reporting dates in certain conditions, December 31 and January 31. So it cleans up some of that. I think it was an oversight then, and again, this comes at the request of the Campaign Finance Commission.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You
Thank
have no more questions this time. Any other senators wish to speak for or against the bill? The question is now on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 51, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, can you read the caption to Senate Bill 80?
Senate Bill 80 by Senator Lucas of the 26th and others, a bill will be titled enactment Part 10 of Article 7 of Chapter 3 of Title 12 of the OCGA, relating to the Georgia Music Hall of Fame Authority so as to remove expired provisions related to the issuance and review of requests for proposals for a new location, ownership, management, and operation of the Hall of Fame to amend Part 12 of Article 7 of Chapter 3 of Title 12 of the OCGA, relating to the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame Authority so as to remove expired provisions related to the issuance and review of requests for proposals for a new location, ownership, management, or operation of the Hall of Fame and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair would like to recognize a senator from the 26th to speak to Senate Bill 80.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the hour is getting late, and an old guy out there trying to stay awake. Ladies and gentlemen, Senate Bill 80 does one thing, and one thing only. It removes the language that was put in state law that said that if you were not self-sufficient as the Music Hall of Fame, or Georgia Sports Hall of Fame, you could not receive appropriations. Of course, you know, during that time, we've lost the Music Hall of Fame. All of the material, most of it was split between Kennesaw State and the University of Georgia. The rest was returned back to the families. The Sports Hall of Fame, the building was declared surplus. A private public partnership bought the building, and then we put in 1.5% of hotel motel tax to run it. This is a state hall of fame, and the only thing this does is take that language out so that we can come back to the state for appropriations to run a state hall of fame. Mr. President, that is it. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. If there are none, I will gladly take my seat.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 18th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
Yeah.
Just one question from a good friend from Macon. Is it not true that I support the good work you've done on this bill and also a good vote of yes on your bill?
I appreciate it, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Senator.
You have no more questions.
Thank you.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? The chair hears none, and the previous question is now ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 54, the nays are 0. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed. Mr. Secretary, please read the caption of Senate Bill 132.
Senate Bill 132 by Senator Harbin of the 16th and others, a bill we titled Enactment Title 33 of the OCGA relating to insurance so as to provide for modernization and updates to amend various provisions of the OCGA for purposes of conformity to repeal Article 2 of Chapter 29A relating to the Commission on the Georgia Health Insurance Risk Pool and for other purposes. Amendment 1 by Senator Karen Shack of the 48th offers the following amendment. Amend Senate Bill 132 by deleting Section 1 through 46 and redesignating Sections 1 through 47 through Section 1 through 101 as Section 1 through 46 through Section 1 through 100, respectively. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 16th to speak to Senate Bill 132.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, this is a departmental bill for the insurance department, making corrections and updates to wording. If you look through it, most of it's there. I do have a friendly amendment from the senator from the 48th bringing another piece back in, which we are okay with. And it's a good bill. And this is just a follow-up from a sister bill that we passed in the last section. If there's no questions, I will sit down.
You have no questions. Would the senator from the 48th like to speak to her amendment? Friendly amendment. She waives. The question is now on the adoption of amendment number 1. Is there objection to the adoption of the amendment? The chair hears none, and the floor amendment is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass as amended? The question is on the passage of the bill as amended. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 54, the nays are 0. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed as amended. Mr. Secretary, please read the caption of Senate Bill 138.
Senate Bill 138 by Senator Martin of the 9th and others, a bill we titled Enactment the OCGA so as to provide certain benefits to disabled first responders to amend Article 3 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA so as to provide for a free license plate for certain disabled first responders to amend Code Sections 485C-1 of the OCGA relating to alternative ad valorem tax on motor vehicles and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Finance offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 138, a bill be titled an act to amend the OCGA to provide certain benefits to disabled first responders and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 9th to speak to Senate Bill 138.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 138 was brought to me by a constituent. The idea was brought to me by a constituent who is a disabled Atlanta police officer who was disabled in the line of duty. What this will do is create our disabled first responders who are disabled on the job in the same way that we give them some of the same benefits that we give our disabled veterans. The first thing it'll do is grant them 2 free license plates, similar to like we do our disabled veterans. The second thing it will do is grant a waiver to TAVT. Now, we did put a limit of that on that in committee, so they have a limit, aggregate limit of up to $50,000 on a 3-year period of value. So that's an aggregate of $50,000 on value of TAVT. And finally, we confirmed that there is a waiver of state income tax on their disability benefits. If there are any questions, I will yield for those. Otherwise, I'll yield the well.
You have no questions. Would any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Question is now on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? The questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 52, the nays are 0. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed by substitute. Ms. Secretary, please read the caption of Senate Bill 162.
Senate Bill 162 by Senator Brass of the 28th and others, a bill be titled an act to amend Title 36 of the OCGA, relating to local government so as to provide for disaster mitigation improvements and broadband services infrastructure and projects of downtown development authorities and development authorities and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 162. Bill be titled an act to amend Title 36 of the OCGA relating to local governments so as to provide for disaster mitigation improvements and broadband services infrastructure and projects of downtown development authorities and for other purposes. Mr. President, Amendment 1 by Senator Brass of the 28th and others offers the following amendment. Amend the committee substitute to Senate Bill 162 by striking lines 36 through the period after enforceable on line 40, striking through subparagraph on line 40, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 28th to speak to Senate Bill 162 and the amendment. Did I miss something?
Thank you, Mr. President. Currently in Georgia law, through the Development Authority Act, there's a financing mechanism known as Property Assessed Clean Energy, also known as PACE financing. And this can be used by local governments that allow commercial, industrial, residential, and multifamily property owners to finance energy efficiency and renewable energy improvements as a special line item on their property tax payment. So this bill is simple. First thing we're going to do is we're adding 2 things to this list of the property assessed clean energy. We're adding internet broadband tie-in, and we're adding storm mitigation improvements. So if you do one of those 2 things to your home or your business, You can finance that through your local development authority, who would form a joint venture with a financing company, and you can then do that through your property taxes. And the second thing we're doing in this bill is we're empowering our Department of Community Affairs to work with communities on figuring out what's the best practices. This is, again, is current law, and all we're doing is adding the internet broadband tie-in and the storm mitigation improvements. With that, and I do have an amendment. I'll walk you through that amendment real quick. On lines 36 through 40, we're basically striking through all those lines. Essentially, the attention of that amendment in committee, I don't think we really accomplished what we were trying to do, and so with some concerns from bankers, we decided to address that. Of course, this doesn't address all their concerns, but it certainly addresses one of them. And then, so basically, as we strike through that provision, the final lines 40 through 42 will read, "This shall not limit the authority of the holder or loan servicer to increase the required monthly escrow by an amount necessary to the annually pay of the assessment." With that, Mr. President, I'll yield for questions.
You have no questions. Chair recognizes the senator from the 3rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
I will yield to the chairman of banking and financial institutions.
You know I love you, right?
Not today, you don't.
Is that a question?
Not today. Will this apply to residential loans of homes as well, properties as well?
Correct.
Correct. Okay. That's all I have. I want to come to the well.
It is current that it allows for that. It's very underutilized. It's very used in very few instances in this state. And again, all we're simply doing is adding broadband tie-in. And let me tell you real quick, let me tell you exactly why this is needed. In Coweta County, if you run from Turin to Sonoy, it is Highway 16. And on Highway 16, I've got houses that are anywhere from 50 to 200 yards off the road. And I've heard estimates anywhere from $700 to $22,000 for them to tie into broadband that is running right along Highway 16. And a lot of those residents, and in fact, I'll even say most of those residents, don't have $22,000 laying around. And so this simply gives them another mechanism. It gives our development authorities a mechanism so that these people can pay and have broadband. With that, are there any other questions?
You have no more questions.
I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 3rd to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now I want to tell you about the impact that this will have on lending in our state. And in particular, lending to individuals who don't have 10 or 20% to put down on a home, who need to get a low interest loan, or who may have trouble qualifying for a regular loan. Let me read the law to you, because the author stated that this is already an existing law. What this does is it gives these types of loans priority over mortgages. And I'm going to read to you from OCGA 364217, which is the code section that we're in, and it says, "A lien for any assessment under this code section that relates to any project shall have the same priority as municipal liens under 48256. Now, when you go to 48256, it says that liens for taxes are superior to all other liens that shall be paid before any other debt, any other lien, or any other claim of any kind." And then the liens are ranked in priority. First, you have taxes to the state, taxes to counties, taxes to schools, and then taxes to municipal corporations. So these liens have that priority of taxes that cities, for taxes issued by cities. and those have priority over mortgages. Now, what does that mean in the lending world? I have, and I've put on your desk, some regulations from our federal lending corporations and programs. The first is from FHA. These are loans that are insured by the Federal Housing Administration. And like I said, they're given to people with lower credit scores, that don't have the big down payments. And let me read to you their concerns. FHA is concerned about the potential for increased losses to the Mutual Mortgage Insurance Fund due to the priority lien status given to such assessments in the case of default. And they're talking about these types of liens. They're also concerned with the lack of consumer protections associated with the origination of the PACE assessment, which are far less comprehensive than those followed in traditional loans. And here's the kicker. Properties encumbered by PACE obligations, that is, these types of obligations, will no longer be eligible for FHA-insured forward mortgages. If you go to the Fannie Mae guidelines, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac provide a secondary market for the sale of loans, and that keeps our mortgage industry going. It provides cash and availability for people to obtain loans. This is their regulation. Fannie Mae will not purchase mortgage loans secured by properties with an outstanding PACE loan unless the terms of the PACE loan program do not provide for lien priority over first mortgage liens. The Freddie Mac regulations. A property subject to a lien that has or may take a priority position is not eligible for sale to Freddie Mac. This includes PACE obligations. Our law says that a PACE obligation will have priority over a mortgage. There's no way around it. And what we're doing is we're going to increase the number of properties or homes that wouldn't be eligible for a loan, and consumers will not know this. And think about this. The author said that tying into the internet could cost $10,000 to $22,000. So you're inserting a $10,000 or $20,000 obligation ahead of a mortgage. And I can tell you that that mortgage was not extended to that consumer with the understanding that they could lose $10,000 or $20,000 worth of equity. This has the potential of significantly disrupting our lending process in our state and harming consumers that need low-interest loans. So, Mr. President, I urge everyone to vote against the bill. There's been an amendment that's offered. All this amendment does is state that you can't provide in a mortgage that a note could be accelerated if this type of loan is obtained. It does nothing to change the priority status of these liens. Even if this amendment is attached to this bill, this lien will have priority over first mortgages. And I've read to you the regulations from the lending programs in this nation. So I urge you to vote against the bill, vote against the amendment. Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 28th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield?
I do.
Senator, where on the priority listed TADs and CIDs, where do they rank?
They would come under the TADs and the CIDs?
Correct.
They have the same, you're talking about this type of loan?
I'll help you, Senator. Is it not true that PACE loan would be right there ranked with CIDs and TADs? Is that not true?
If they have the same priority as a municipal corporation lien, they will.
Is it not true that they do?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't researched that.
Thank you. That's it.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. You're well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? All right, we'll take up amendment number 1. The question is on the adoption of amendment number 1. Is there objection to adoption of the amendment? Hearing none, the floor amendment is adopted. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute as amended? Chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted as amended. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 39, the nays are 14. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, please read the caption to Senate Bill 110.
Senate Bill 110 by Senator Stone of the 23rd and others, a bill to be titled enactment Title 15 of the OCGA relating to courts, so as to establish a statewide business court pursuant to the Constitution of the state to amend Code Section 45-7-4 of the OCGA relating to general provisions regarding salaries and fees, so as to designate a salary for the judge of the statewide business court and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Judiciary offers the following substitute: Senate Bill 110, a bill be titled enactment Title 15 of the OCGA relating to courts, so as to establish a statewide business court pursuant to the Constitution of the state to provide for terms of court and where such court shall sit, to provide for location and proceedings, to provide for subject matter jurisdiction, to provide for filings, pleadings, and fees, to provide for a judge of the statewide business court, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 23rd to speak to Senate Bill 110.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I bring you Senate Bill 110. Georgia has been named the best state in America to do business for 6 years in a row. A key component in keeping this status is to maintain a business-friendly legal environment. In order to do this, we need to have courts that expedite resolution of complex business disputes in an expert manner. States around the country have successfully established business courts for this purpose. Last year, you may recall, House Resolution 993 was introduced based on a recommendation of the Court Reform Council. It proposed to amend the state constitution to create a statewide business court. In the Senate, we molded this resolution by 1, requiring legislative ratification of judges appointed by the governor. 2, recognizing that individual superior court circuits could operate business court divisions apart from the statewide court. Some have already experimented with this. And 3, ensuring that cases could be removed from local courts and could only be brought with the consent of the parties. The voters approved H.R. 993 by a wide margin last November. SB 110 is enabling legislation to implement this constitutional amendment. The legislation remains true to the directives of the Constitution. It sets limits on the subject matter jurisdiction of the court to civil matters involving business law, such as the Uniform Commercial Code, with a minimum threshold for damages to exclude smaller cases. It excludes cases such as personal injury, wrongful death, residential landlord-tenant, and foreclosure. There is attached to the bill a fiscal note. The fiscal note sets out the cost of establishing the court at $300,000 plus or minus, and the annual operating cost of at $1 million, or a little bit less than that. This is going to the savings to the business community are going to far outweigh the cost of this court. Where courts like this have been established, the caseload has been expedited in an efficient manner, and this will be the experience we believe in Georgia. The Chamber supports the concept of statewide business courts. The bill sets out limitations on how cases can be brought. It protects the important provision that the parties need to express consent before their cases are brought in this court. That consent can be expressed by contractual agreement between businesses, and the experience of the court will increase confidence and build the caseload over time. Estimates are that several hundred cases a year will be brought in this court. Court in no way impairs local jurisdictions, but is here to continue making Georgia a business-friendly legal environment. I urge your support for SB 110. Mr. President, I'll be happy to yield for questions.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you. I urge your support for SB 110.
Any other senators wish to speak for or against the bill? Question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Go ahead and exit. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 52, the nays are 2. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed by substitute. Ms. Secretary, please read the caption of Senate Bill 163.
Senate Bill 163 by Senator Thompson of the 14th and others, a bill we title and act amend Part 14 of Article 6 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA, relating to other educational programs under the Quality Basic Education Act, so as to authorize home study students to participate in extracurricular and interscholastic activities in the student's resident public school system, provide for definitions, provide eligibility requirements, prohibit certain limitations by resident school systems, public schools, and athletic associations with respect to home study students participating in extracurricular and interscholastic activities, and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Education and Youth Committee offers following substitute. Senate Bill 163, a bill be titled and acted in Part 14 of Article 6 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA, relating to other educational programs under the Quality Basic Education Act, so as to authorize home study students to participate in extracurricular and interscholastic activities and for other purposes. Amendment 1 by Senator Parent of the 42nd and others offers the following amendment. Amend the Senate Committee substitute to Senate Bill 163 by striking "and" on line 82, by replacing "school" with "school" and on line 85, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 14th to speak to Senate Bill 163.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the Senate. Today, I present to you SB 163, the Equal Opportunity for Access Bill, a bill that aligns with the principal core of why many of us serve here in this great chamber. Each year, including this session, we attempt to pass legislation that will create parity for the children in our state by allowing them equal access to the incredible opportunities our state, regardless of where they live. Many of you have and continue to work tirelessly to expand access to cell coverage, rapid transit, health care, education, and many other things, regardless, again, where the family chooses to live. If a family chooses to live in rural Georgia, we do our very best to minimize the limitations on these services and to continue working together as one Georgia. SB 163 seeks to build upon this effort. It simply allows students that are homeschooled to have access to the school athletics and extracurricular activities of the school of which they normally would attend. I'd like to share the story of Angelica. She lives in Atlanta and contacted me to share that this bill will have a profound positive impact on her and her family. You see, she lives in an area where the schools are failing and would prefer to place her children in private school if she had the resources. Unfortunately, she struggles, as many other single-parent families, to provide for her family, and private school just doesn't fit the limited family budget. You see, the dilemma is clear. She wants to be a responsible parent and provide the absolute best opportunity for her children to thrive while allowing them the athletic opportunities for college scholarships. The decision to homeschool was not a choice for her. It was the only choice for her. Someone stated that choices have consequences, and most of us would agree that bad choices do have adverse consequences, and they should. But I would submit to you, my friends, that responsible choices should provide opportunities, not penalties. This sweet lady is trying, as many others, to break a cycle and have her oldest be the first in the family to attend college. Being afforded the opportunity to earn an athletic scholarship by participating in their local school is a responsible and appropriate thing to do. 35 other states already provide this opportunity. With that, Mr. President, I'll yield the well and ask your favorable consideration unless there are any questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 29th to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the senator for bringing this legislation, this important legislation, and the reason why is so we can correct some, and I'll politely use the word ignorance, that goes around this state right now about children who are schooled at home. It was a text message that I received just a little while ago. I'm not sure it was intended for me, but it said, we are being asked to include children in our extracurricular programs for whom we, number one, get no funding. I think tax dollars are pretty strong funding, especially when parents that live in communities out here whose children do not go to public schools, and they keep them at home and homeschool them, either for religious reasons or because of some physical disability or some mental health disability, and they would rather have their children close and safe at home, but they continue to pay their taxes that help fund football programs, orchestras, bands, and other things. Secondly, have no disciplinary or academic measures. The senator has wisely included these measures in his legislation and voids this argument. And then they ask the question, would we want a homeschooled child to sit first chair in our band? Well, I don't believe everybody deserves a trophy. I believe the best violinists should sit in chair one, whether they be homeschooled, public schooled, or whatever. This is about fairness. This is about Americans and Georgians paying taxes and asking for a return on their investment. I urge you to vote yes on this measure. Thank you. If there are no questions, Mr. President, I yield the well.
You have no questions. Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 42nd to speak to her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sympathetic to some of the arguments for this piece of legislation, but I think that we could do a little bit more to mitigate the downsides and testimony against it that I've heard throughout the years, and that's why I offered an amendment where students would be able to participate in the sports programs as long as they were enrolled in 2 classes. Of the 35 states that allow some form of homeschoolers to participate in sports programs, 8 of them do it this way, where they have to be enrolled for a couple classes. Others do it more by just putting it in, letting the superintendent work it out, or allowing districts to do it if they want to. So it's not like a 35 state blanket mandate to allow homeschoolers to participate in these interscholastic activities across the country. So we didn't actually have testimony against this legislation when it was presented this year, but we did have this exact same bill in education last year, and there was testimony against it. So I wanted to raise a few of those things and how I believe that my amendment would help assuage some of the problems with the bill while still going a long way to meet the concerns of the author and some others. So, part of the argument for it is, hey, folks whose kids are in homeschool pay taxes just like people whose kids are in the schools. And that's true, but people who homeschool are certainly not the only taxpayers who are supporting our schools. Private school students' parents pay taxes to support the schools, and so do taxpayers without children. And even those of us who have had children will spend the majority of our lives paying taxes for the schools while we're not using them. So that argument to me has some flaws. We decided a long time ago as a society that we would all pay for education for young Americans and for young Georgians, regardless of whether or not we had children in public schools, for the greater good of the whole, because it benefits all of us and for our economy to have children that are educated. But the argument here is I contribute my tax money, and so I should get to take advantage of the services and the facilities too. Well, if you take that a little farther, someone, not just folks whose kids are in private school, but even just regular citizens who might want to use the gym or the track can say, hey, I want to be able to go over to my local high school or my local elementary school and shoot hoops in the gym when it's raining. And by the way, my baseball league is really strict about their fields and won't let us practice when it rained 3 days earlier, which our league does. So I want to be able to go over to the ball field at the high school and have practice there because I'm a taxpayer and I pay for this too. So I think we need to have it a little tighter than that I also pay taxes argument. Also, a lot of the programs we're talking about aren't really funded with taxpayer dollars. A lot of these, they may be partially funded with taxpayer dollars, but they're certainly not funded with taxpayer dollars for these sports at the same level that the scholastic activities are. And a lot of them are more like, let's go ahead and raise money at the bake sale and do a car wash. I mean, that's how I raised money for my sports programs when I was in high school. Those are my arguments. The arguments that we heard last year from the Georgia High School Sports Arguments Authority were a couple other things, which included, here you're going to have families participating that, unlike other families, haven't chosen to fully invest themselves in our school system community. And you are then displacing other children from a valuable spot on a team, especially when playing time may be limited to only some of the top athletes. You're displacing other children who are fully invested in our community, our school community. And I've told the author and some others, it's like when you see eye to eye with someone, I'm like one eye to one eye on this one, not two. And so that's why I offered this amendment, because I think it goes a long way to bringing me to two eyes. Where look, if the student is taking 2 courses, then that eliminates the arguments that private school students and all regular taxpayers should also have access to the facilities or the teams. And it also helps go a long way to eliminating the argument that the student would not be invested in the school community to a certain extent. And so, if my amendment were to be adopted, I would be able to vote for this legislation, but without it, I think I'll probably have to vote no, because I think we just have some perfecting to do to get to where we could all be in a better place with this particular bill. And Mr. President, I'm happy to yield for questions, or if there are none, take my seat.
Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 14th for a question.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Yield.
Absolutely.
Senator, do you support public education?
Absolutely.
Do you feel that the public education right now is fully funded?
Well, let's see. I mean, are you talking about, did we fully fund the QBE last year and this year? Are you talking about, are we going to actually go all the way to the pay raises that we were talking about on the campaign trail and when we first got here? Are you talking about the 16 years when we didn't even fund QBE and the fact that it needs to be updated also? We kind of fully funded it the last couple of years, sort of.
I'm confused by your answer, Senator, but you further
Yes.
yield? So let me rephrase the question. Do you feel like our public education and our public schools right now are strained with funding?
I do. I don't think they have, I think we have a little ways to work on that. I do.
Okay. So, Senator, what I think you're proposing here is that taxpayers that have chosen to homeschool, you're proposing that they come and use resources by taking 2 classes from the school. I don't think you are asking them to pay for those, so they, in essence, will be taking away more resources from the school because those school resources have already been allocated.
Well,
so
Senator,
is that correct?
It's an interesting point, because actually in Virginia's code, I can tell you that they've gone ahead and addressed that exact same issue. In Virginia, they do allow state funding for homeschooled students, and they do have that as part of this bill. So I guess I do think that that's something that does need to be worked out. I don't think it has to be part of my amendment right this second, but I take your point, and I do think that that is yet again something else that needs to be perfected about your legislation.
Senator, for the yield?
Sure.
So to make sure I understand, you are proposing an amendment of which I'm against, but your amendment is going to have homeschoolers come and use or take courses that are then further going to deteriorate the funding that's already in the schools, of which you've already said need more resources. Is that correct?
I don't think so, Senator, because there's a whole lot that happens in the schools and between the school boards and superintendents and families that we haven't stuck directly in code. We've got DOE, we've got school boards, we've got superintendents. I don't agree that would come to pass. I think that could be worked out.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator, further yield?
Sure.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 36th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
I do.
To my friend in the well, and you may or may not know the answer to this, but I was just, as we went through the debate on the school voucher bill, SB 173, earlier in the week, I was informed that for us to say we are fully funding our schools, meeting the QBE formula, is a misstatement. It's a statement I've made. It's I think was implicit in the question that was just asked of you, that in fact what the funding did on the public school funding was to bring it back up to the level when Governor Perdue started his austerity cuts.
That's correct. I
That's
believe
right.
it was right
and
when
that,
he was elected.
In fact, that level was not fully funding QBE.
Right.
We were not fully funding QBE the year that Governor Perdue wrote his first budget and put in an austerity cut for public education. So we were underfunding it already, and then we'd put austerity cuts to that funding, and that this recent allocation in the budget the Governor deal made last year, and then the current budget we're looking at, is not fully funding the QBE formula. It's simply getting back to the point where the austerity cuts started from. Is that your understanding as well?
Well, Senator, you have served a long time, and I appreciate the wisdom and experience that you bring to that, having watched this unfold over these 19, 20 years. And you've stated it very well, but it is my understanding, as you said, that we were not fully funding it. Then the austerity cuts began right after Governor Perdue was elected in '02, so starting in about '03, and that we didn't even get anywhere near close to filling that gap until we convened last year in 2018.
But it's true, isn't it, that just in the last, it might have been 3 years ago, we pushed down to the local schools the responsibility for paying the health benefits for the school bus drivers.
We certainly did.
That had been shouldered, been a part of the state funding to local schools, was to cover that, and we pushed that onto local schools. And that our track record on really fully committing to funding public education is spotty at best. We'd love to all put our shoulder to the wheel and work together to do better on that, but it is true that we're underfunding, and we have very bad ratios of student counselors, school psychologists, school social workers, all of those ancillary professionals that help teachers get good outcomes with their students. Isn't that true?
I would agree with that, Senator.
Thank you.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well, and I urge adoption of Amendment Number 1. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 2nd to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. I urge you to support the amendment from the senator from the 42nd. And I urge you also be cautious. I'm a big sports fan, a big fan of sports, football, baseball, soccer, you have it. I like it. I just don't want that our prime athletes to look at staying home, being homeschooled, to concentrate on sports versus getting a quality, well-rounded education. If we allow certain athletes to stay at home and not participate in the regular classes or give them the out, especially our low-performing students that are gifted athletes, if we allow them an out, they won't be well-rounded. But I also feel that we're opening up potential lawsuits, because if we allow it for homeschoolers, we must also allow it for private schools who don't have certain activities at their own private schools, like who don't have track or who don't have debate teams or a marching band. We must also allow virtual schools participants to also participate. So I'd like for us to be cautious about this bill, but also I'd like for you to support what I like to call the Herschel Walker Amendment. Support this amendment, and I think it'll make the bill a lot better. Thank you. I yield well.
The question is on Amendment Number 1, sorry. Is there objection to the adoption of the amendment? There's objection. All those in favor of the amendment from the senator from the 42nd will vote yea, opposed nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. For what reason does the senator from the 42nd rise?
Inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true, Mr. President, that if this amendment passes, it would be a wonderful compromise and we could all feel good about it when we end our day?
I'm certain the senator believes so. Chair recognizes the senator from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Isn't it true that a vote no will keep these separate so that you're not marrying homeschools and making them become public school students?
Certain the senator believes so. On the adoption of the amendment, the yeas are 23, the nays are 32. This amendment has failed. The question is now on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 35, the nays are 19. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 167?
Senate Bill 167 by Senator Brass of the 28th and others, a bill be titled enactment code section 1511-211 of the OCJ relating to relative search by defect so as to provide that a foster placement for a child educated as a dependent child may be deemed as a child's fictive kin in determining such child's permanency plan and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 28th to speak to Senate Bill 167.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, today I rise to talk about Senate Bill 167. And I'll tell you a quick story. About 2 years ago, right after my very first session, I was invited by a friend to attend a foster parent association, a local one in Coweta County. And I get in there and I'm talking with these foster parents, and the president told me something that's going to stick in my mind forever. And she told me that in all her years of being a member of that association, she doesn't ever remember an elected official showing up. And it broke my heart. And I decided right then and there I was going to do something to help them. And I didn't know what it was. And for 2 years, I didn't know what I was going to do to help them. And sometimes when you don't know what to do, the good Lord just slaps you in the face with something. And earlier this year, in walked my office, Reverend Joel and Jennifer Shimpo. And they discussed with me some issues with foster care and how children are staying in homes for sometimes a year, 2 years. And at that point, relatives are showing up and taking these foster children from the home. Just showing up out of nowhere. And so as I dug into the law and currently what we have, and we brought in Director Rawlings in on this meeting and seeked guidance from him, and he actually said he had a court case that was overturned where he gave permanency to the foster parent. And in the appeals court, it was overturned. And it was a family member, I believe from Kentucky, a distant cousin, showed up and took this child from the home, which is great, maybe long term, maybe not. We don't know. But what we do know is stability of a child is so important. It is so important. We have around 14,000 foster children in this state. And we don't have a lot of foster homes for them to go to. And so they're being shuffled all over this state, leaving their home counties, leaving their hometowns. And so simply what this bill does is it's going to help give the foster parents a little bit more preference when deciding permanency for these foster children. It's going to help with the stability of that child so that they can grow up in an environment that they know, they're familiar with a group of people that love them and where a bond has been formed. And that's simply what this bill does. So if you have any questions about that, I'd love to answer. Mr. President, I'll yield for questions.
You have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 48th to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to speak in favor of this bill. I speak in favor of this bill because of our personal family experience where my sister-in-law took in 2 children in foster care and cared for them, I believe, for over a year. But when it came time to be able to adopt them and to bring them fully into her home, there was no way to do it. It was emotionally wrenching to split the family apart because indeed they had become a family. And so I commend the senator from the 28th, because I do believe children can make choices, particularly if they've been in a stable home for a year and if staying in that home is in their best interests, which I believe our DFACS people can make an assessment as to that. And I also believe that children as young as 11 can have an input. Of course, ultimately would be up to a court and to experts in this area to decide what is in the best interest of the child, but I encourage everyone to vote in favor of this bill. If there are no questions, I yield the will.
You have no questions. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? The chair hears none, and the previous question is now ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 55, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption to Senate Bill 177?
Senate Bill 177 by Senator Brass of the 28th and others. The bill will be titled and amend Chapter 1 of Title 20 of the OCGA, ruling the General Assembly generally so as to provide the requirements for consideration of local legislation revising existing districts or creating new districts by the General Assembly, provide for preparation or review of local districting plans by the staff of the Legislative and Congressional Reapportionment Office and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair wants to make sure the senator from the 28th doesn't pull a hamstring running back up here. Chair recognizes the senator from the 28th to speak to Senate Bill 177.
Thank you, Mr. President. And since you keep looking at me so crazy-eyed when I sprint down here, I just, in my first year, the senator from the 53rd made note to me that in the old days, senators used to run down on crossover and on sine die out of respect to their other senators because there's so many bills on the calendar. So out of respect to my 55 brethren and sisters, I run down here and I try to do it without pulling a hammy. But Senate Bill 177, this is a little redistricting bill. It's just on how the locals, it's the process in which they do it. We're not changing what they do. We're just simply changing in what order. We're telling if they're going to use third-party maps, that is fine, but they just need to send it to us first before they vote on it locally. With that, I'll yield for questions.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 17th.
Does the senator yield?
Maybe. Yes.
Senator, it would have been faster if you had taken a bus down to the well.
I'm not sure a bus could fit through there, Senator.
Do you
If
continue
you
to yield?
venture over to our side, you might know that.
Yield for another question?
I yield for another question.
It's a hypothetical. If there were 10 children on that bus, you were riding down to the well, how many children would you save today?
This bill deals with maps and local maps, and all children live within a map somewhere, so we're saving them all. Any further questions?
Chair recognizes the senator from the 26th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. To Senator Yield.
Yes, Senator.
Senator, how does this affect local home rule? Basically, governments have, under home rule, drawn their own lines and had those debates. Today, a lot of them use RDC when it comes to reapportionment after the 10 years. What this is saying is that you can't do anything unless we do it.
No, sir. Well, when they draw their maps, they still have to send them to us to put in the code. You know, when we do a map, it goes into a law, and there's a bunch of coordinates in that law. So simply what this does is, rather than them draw their maps and vote on them locally and then send them up here for us to add into code, which we are then finding in some cases they're non-compliant with federal law or state law or go against the Voting Rights Act in 1965, we're finding issues, we're having to send them back. And when we send them back, then they have to wait until the next scheduled meeting to vote on them. And then they have to send them back. And in some cases, they're missing us in session and could cost their redistricting maps 1 year, 2 years, whatever the case may be. So we're not changing what they do. We're simply changing in what order they do it. Does that answer your question, Senator?
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd to speak to a late arriving amendment. Would the secretary read the amendment?
Amendment 1 by Senator Perrin of the 42nd offers the following amendment. Amend Senate Bill 177 by striking the quotation mark at the end of line 142, inserting after line 142 the following. No reapportionment plan or district shall be drawn with the intent to favor or disfavor a political party, incumbent, or other person or group, and no use shall be made of any of the following data in preparing a reapportionment plan or drawing a district. 1, residential addresses of incumbent legislators. 2, perceived or actual political affiliations of registered voters. 3, past election results. 4, voting history data. Or 5, any demographic information other than population head counts. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd to speak to her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, in case anyone had started to fall asleep at this late hour, I'm glad we put this up on the board to really wake everybody up. And, you know, I'm so excited that I have this other fantastic amendment to really improve this bill and that I think we can all get behind. So what my amendment does is it puts a few standards related to redistricting into our law. This is an issue I've worked on for many years now. So the standards, which include that reapportionment plans should not be drawn with the intent to favor or disfavor a political party, incumbent, or any other person or group, are supported on a bipartisan basis by voters across our state and nation who strongly believe that they should be picking their representatives instead of having their representatives choose them and predetermine the outcome of the election. Utilizing these standards can make our democracy work better, bring more people into the process, and have our governments better reflect the people they seek to govern. As it occurs now, redistricting is often used to amplify partisan advantage and punish those seen as a threat to the current order. This leads to elections that are not as competitive as they would be otherwise. This has long been the case in Georgia. The 2018 elections were some of the most competitive in recent memory, but even so, 33 out of the 56 districts were uncontested in the Senate. 33 out of the 56 districts in the Senate were uncontested in the general election, as well as 111 of the 180 House districts. This net effect encourages representatives to be primarily responsive to the small, very partisan groups that are important in primaries and to ignore the bulk of their districts that vote only in the general election. This is rational behavior on the part of all of us as elected officials, but it leads to policy decisions that are not representative of the views of the public that we are supposed to be and claim to be representing. When the districts are skewed and the only position available is the party line, compromise and discussion and good government are casualties. In fact, it's gotten so bad that just this morning I heard that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and they're disseminating this down to all their affiliate chambers throughout the states, are now giving legislators points for co-sponsoring bills with members of the opposite party and working together across the aisle. That's how bad it's gotten that the Chamber of Commerce has decided we are throwing out our positions. We don't care if it's something we disagree with. If these two parties are working together, we give that legislator points. And I submit to you that part of the problem and the reason the business community is more reflective of the center of the electorate than our legislative bodies are these days, one of the reasons for that is partisan gerrymandering. Now, I mentioned that fair districts are extremely popular across the political spectrum, and I want to make sure you're aware that a majority of states have enacted reforms to this process. In fact, just in the last year, 5 additional states did so, most of them moving to an independent redistricting commission, which is a bill that I've had for the last 7 or 8 years. The most recent states are Michigan, Utah, Missouri, Colorado, and Ohio. And both chambers in Virginia, just in the last couple weeks, passed legislation for an independent commission. What this tells you is that more and more voters are engaged on this issue, and they are expressing their disgust with gerrymandering. Some of you may not know that we just had a ripe example of this in our very own state. In fact, 2 or 3 days ago, HB 564 was filed, which is a classic quid pro quo swap of voters between 2 districts, one Republican and one Democratic, in order to make both districts safer for those incumbents and the political parties that currently hold those seats. Well, what happened? The political backlash against all those representatives that signed that bill, members of both parties, was immediate and fierce. And that bill was dead within 24 hours, within 36 hours. That shows you how engaged voters are on this issue. The landscape has shifted. It is no longer okay to be shifting people around, shoring districts up for incumbents, making it safe for one party. The voters are standing up loud and clear on this issue. And again, reforms are already in a majority of states, and they're saying, forget it. You will not do this. This is our district, and you are our representatives, and we will call the shots. Thanks very much. And I am proud to report that after that immediate and fierce backlash against those representatives, that bill died. It is high time we reform this process, a process that has been abused by both parties in Georgia over the years. Only by working together across the aisle can we remove the potential for political abuses and protect the rights of all Georgians, both red and blue. Thank you, Mr. President. I encourage the adoption of my amendment, and I'm happy to yield for questions if there are any.
Chair recognizes a senator from the 46th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Certainly.
All right, here's the problem I have. In these other states you're talking about, voters are required to register as a Republican or a defendant, so they are easily identifiable to the map drawers. In Georgia, we don't require registration. So you could vote in a Republican primary. I can vote in a Democratic primary. And how would I know when I'm drawing a line whether you're Democrat or Republican when you vote both ways? Some of the most vicious emails I've received have been from Democratic voters in Athens. They received my direct mail because they voted in Republican primaries. They voted for Regina Quick against Doug McKillop. They voted for Paul Brown against Senator Whitehead, who for United States Congress. And they get my mail saying, why are you sending this to me? And I'm because, well, you're a swing voter. See, we don't have registered Democrats, registered Republicans, where we can identify anybody to do partisan gerrymandering. So this is just all fluff that you're imagining in Georgia. We don't have the data to do what other states do and have legislated against. I just fail to see how we could possibly consider that as a factor when we don't force our voters to register in order to vote in a primary.
Well, Senator, I hate to break it to you, but that's so 20 years ago. Have you heard of Facebook, all the data that everyone has gathered on all of us, all the social media posts? These days, people look at what you're writing on social media. They look at what neighborhood you live in. They look at what magazines you get. Everything is totally down to the science now, and it's all through the use of technology. So that was the case, and that's why the urgency of these resolutions has really picked up over the ensuing 2 decades, because it was really just starting after the 2000 census, but after the 2010 census, the data is 100% there to absolutely make an extremely good call on what the partisan leaning of that voter is, and slice and dice very surgically.
So you're going to ask a court to look into my Facebook communications, into my emails, into what magazines I subscribe to, and identify my party by that when I might have voted in another primary? There's no court that could use those factors to determine partisan gerrymandering. There is no law, a constitutionality against that right now. I think you're ahead of yourself. We might see some U.S. Supreme Court decisions that say that. And if so, then Georgia's going to have to figure out how do we identify our voters, by their Facebook activity,
Senator,
or by their voting records.
Senator, I wish you were right, but unfortunately, that is just not correct in the current environment. Both parties, yours and mine, have reams of data on every voter. Every voter. We have Vote Builder. I don't know what yours is called, but if you go into that thing, it's not just, oh, you voted once. They have as much data on you as humanly possible, and that's what all candidates and political parties operate under.
Okay, well,
it's just not reality to say that we don't know. And besides, we've had these districts for many years, so you still have a general sense of how a precinct voted, so you know where that person's address was, even if it's not down to the exact science, which I would submit to you it's pretty close these days. Even if it's not, you can still, with a high degree of certainty. I mean, why else are we seeing this legislation across the hall? Which in 2015 they swapped these precincts to shore up the one district. But once that gerrymander failed in the last election, they want to swap them back. They know exactly how those voters lean. They know exactly how those voters lean, and that's why we passed that in 2015, and that's why they had the temerity to submit it this year.
Would the senator yield for one
Yes, I
final
will.
question? Do you agree that voters can change their mind on their party preference depending on who the candidate may be and their positions?
Well, Senator, that's exactly why I have proposed over the years the Independent Redistricting Commission. And you know what? It's interesting because one of the complaints I've heard about it is that there aren't really real independent voters out there. And I'm like, well, yeah, there are. We live in a highly polarized time. Certainly, there are more people who are kind of more leaning towards one party or another, or the base of one party or another. But I completely agree with you. There are definitely independent voters out there, and that's why my Independent Redistricting Commission legislation, modeled on many of the other states that have already enacted these reforms, has representatives from both parties and independent voters.
Just to be clear, this amendment here has nothing to do with that other legislation you're referencing.
Well, no, because
this is not independent redistricting.
This is not you are correct, Senator, that this is not an independent redistricting commission. However, these standards are also within that legislation. But I agree with your point that there are certainly people who do change their minds.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the dialogue, and I will yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 28th to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. While I appreciate the intent of the senator from the 42nd, what she's trying to do here, and I can certainly appreciate the content of her amendment here, and I think we can all agree that, yes, it's germane by the book. But the problem here is you're talking about a national debate, you're talking about a statewide debate, and we simply have a department bill that deals with local maps and the process in which they do that. And all this will do is you're adding more debate to such a clean bill, and it's pointless. And so I'll encourage my fellow senators to vote no against the amendment, and let's let this simple department bill move across to the House to be voted on. With that, I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. Any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? All right, let's take up amendment number 1. The question is now on the adoption of amendment number 1. Is there objection to the adoption of the amendment? There's objection. All right, all those in favor of the amendment from the senator from the 42nd will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the adoption of the amendment, the yeas are 21, the nays are 34, and the amendment has failed. All right, moving on. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 54, the nays are 1. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed. Mr. Secretary, can you read the caption to Senate Bill 186?
Senate Bill 186 by Senator Cowser to the 46th and others, a bill we enactment in Chapter 12 of Title 53 of the OCGA, relating to trusts so as to establish qualified self-settled spendthrift trusts to provide for exceptions for spendthrift provisions of trusts which are not within qualified self-settled spendthrift trusts, to provide for claims by creditors for such trusts and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Banking and Financial Institutions offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 186, a bill we titled enactment, Chapter 12, Title 53 of the OCGA relating to trusts, was established qualified self-settled spendthrift trusts as provide for definition, provide for exceptions for spendthrift provisions of trusts which are not within qualified self-settled spendthrift trusts, provide for claims by creditors for such trusts, provide for the creation of such trusts, provide for transfers to such trusts, provide for vacancies of trusts, provide for standards for such trusts to be considered non-revocable, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from Athens to speak to Senate Bill 186.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry I didn't run like the senator from the 28th. I'm not quite that young, but I do have long legs, and I made my way on down here. This is a bill that is for estate planning and tax planning devices. They're called spendthrift trusts. It's a type of law that's in place in about 18 other states now. It allows a person that puts their assets in a trust to be able to withdraw up to 5% per year for their own benefit. There are protections built in this that I think have satisfied the concerns of all parties to make certain these can't be used to shield valid creditors from receiving money due them, such as alimony, child support, any type of equitable distribution of property in a divorce, a tort judgment against you. You can't use this to shield from that. Any fine or criminal restitution that you might be required to pay, and also any transfer of property into a trust cannot be done for fraudulent purposes to deprive a creditor of your assets. And finally, there's a provision for the banking industry which satisfied them that if you list these assets as collateral on your loan applications, you can't later shield them from the bank in the trust. This passed the banking committee last year. It's passed this body last year and is again passed out of the banking committee this year. I would appreciate your favorable consideration. Glad to answer any questions you might have.
Chair recognizes the minority leader for a question.
Senator Yield.
I'll yield.
You mentioned you could set aside some money for like retirement, draw a certain amount a year, 5% a year, I think you
Yes.
referred to, or 6% a year.
I think it's 5% or less per year.
And could you adjust that amount within that period, or?
Only down, not up. Yes.
And if you decided that you needed the assets once you established the trust, what would be your ability to make changes at that time?
You can't. These are permanent.
I noticed that if Senator Further yields,
I yield.
I noticed that you allow for things like alimony and child support to possibly not be impeded by this trust.
To definitely not be impeded. Yes. If you look on page 6 down at the bottom, starting at line 199, it lists the categories of claims that cannot be protected against or shielded from in this device.
If the Senator would further yield, could you tell us some of the things, common examples of things that would be prevented from, that it would shield you from? What are some common things that you're trying to shield people from if divorces and some of these listed aren't one of them?
I don't know of other things, but I think the main thing is people are trying to avoid a higher tax rate. Put their assets in here. It's a separate legal entity as a trust.
Senator, further yield?
I yield.
Do people usually get professionals, attorneys, or professional financial consultants to prepare these type trusts?
Absolutely.
Are
Yes.
there any minimum amount of assets?
I don't think there's a minimum asset. I'm not in that field of law, but they're generally high net worth people find these useful. The word I was looking for a minute ago was irrevocable. These can't be revoked. Once you set it up, you're stuck with it.
And if you just further yield, just could you explain a little bit on the tax ramifications? What taxes would you be shielded from? Federal income tax, or?
It wouldn't be shielded, but it would be at whatever rate based on the amount of income generated by your assets in the trust. So these can have, that can be investment type things that are generating income. They'd be taxed at the tax rate of the trust rather than the individual that previously owned it before putting the assets in the trust.
You have no more questions.
Thank you. I yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair recognizes the senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was against this bill last year, and I'm against it this year. And in fact, Governor Deal vetoed the legislation last year after it was passed out of both houses. And in terms of his veto statement, he particularly said that he felt like it didn't have the proper safeguards in place. And why is that? This is a complicated trust vehicle, but what you have is you have the person who is settling the trust able to be the beneficiary of the trust and basically put their assets in there to shield themselves from creditors. It's really a vehicle that can be used to defraud creditors. I think it's a bad idea. Governor Deal thought it was a bad idea. He vetoed it last year. So just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 36, the nays are 18. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, can you read the caption of Senate Bill 195?
Senate Bill 195 by Senator Huffstetler of 52nd and others. The bill will be titled enactment Title 33 of the OCGA relating to insurance so as to provide for consumer protections and freedom of information regarding prescription drug benefits and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Health and Human Services offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 195. A bill will be titled enactment Title 33 of the OCGA relating to insurance so as to provide for consumer protections and freedom of information regarding prescription drug benefits and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 52nd to speak to Senate Bill 195.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is about prescription formularies and about having transparency, consistency, and clarity in them. It does not mandate that providers put certain drugs in the formulary. It just means that you've got to publish what that formulary is. It's got to be on a website that doesn't use passwords, is in a 10-point font, and that if you change your formulary, it has to be updated on your website within 7 days. When a provider looks for the formulary and sends in a request on a certain drug, you've got 4 days to reply to them. If it's incomplete and they send you back a completed one, you've got 2 more days. Some of the things from the providers, they thought that the fine for not being on there was too high. It was at $25,000, so I met them in the middle and I dropped it to $1,000. And they also said that the October 1st date was a little too quick for them and requested January 1st. And there's a group set up that will oversee this of pharmacists and providers and consumers, and they may want on the House to give them a little bit more leeway in things, and so we may look at that over there as well. But this is a good bill for the consumers so that everyone knows what is on the formulary. And if there's no questions, I'll yield the well.
You have no questions. Chair recognizes the senator from the 48th to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to stress or to ask for support of this bill. As I think I shared with you on the campaign trail this last year, one of the biggest issues that was brought to my attention by constituents was the cost of health care and also the cost of prescription drugs. I commend the senator for bringing this bill. I commend the transparency in making sure that folks know what they're going to have to pay. I also share that one of the best provisions in this legislation is that the formularies have to clearly disclose step therapy. While on the campaign trail, I heard from many people, including folks who suffered from arthritis, about step therapy, which refers to the process of requiring a patient to start drug therapy with the cheapest approved option, and then upon that not working, graduating to a more costly drug. So even if your doctor knows you need a more expensive drug, you have to try out all the other ones first, all the while suffering from symptoms that you and your doctor know could have been prevented by a different drug on the outset. So again, I commend you to support this bill, and I think it goes yet another step toward making our healthcare system better for all Georgians. If there are no questions, I yield the well.
You have no questions. The question is now on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 56, the nays are 0. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, will you read the caption of Senate Bill 212?
Senate Bill 212 by Senator Martin IX and others. A bill will be titled Enactment Code Section 4527 of the OCGA relating to an examination of applicants so as to revise the criteria by which the Department of Driver Services shall authorize certain licensed driver training schools to administer the on-the-road driving skills testing and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Education and Youth offers the following substitute, Senate Bill 212. A bill will be titled Enactment Code Section 4527 of the OCGA relating to examination of applicants so as to revise the criteria by which the Department of Driver Services shall authorize certain licensed driving training schools to administer the on-road driving skills tests and for other purposes. Amendment 1 by Senator Martin IX and others offers the following amendment. Amend the Senate Committee substitute to Senate Bill 212 by inserting between lines 32 and 33 the following. E, a minimum of 6 hours of in-car instruction for persons 17 years of age or older with a licensed instructor employed by the licensed driver training school administering the on-the-road driving skills test. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 9th to speak to Senate Bill 212 and his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. SB 212 clears up an older section of the code that deals with allowing vendors to offer driver training courses and in-car training and give the driving road test for driver's licenses. At that time, the code did not anticipate the advent of online training. We also now allow a parent to replace the private in-car training with a 40-hour parent-proctored in-car training. This bill clarifies that there can be any combination of the online or classroom instruction and private in-car or parent in-car instruction. The amendment, all that does, the amendment was not ready when the committee met on the last day of committees that we had, All it does is enters a section in there that clarifies that drivers that are ages 17 years or older that do not require the in-car instruction, so they're eligible for taking the driver road test as well. I don't know if I wrote that down right.
You have no
That's
questions.
right. Thank you.
Any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure or the amendment? All right, the question is on the adoption of amendment number 1. Is there objection to adoption of the amendment? The chair hears none, and the floor amendment is adopted. The question now is on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute as amended? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted as amended. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 53, the nays are 1. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed by substitute.